my name is Ozgur, and I want to start off my speech today by asking you all a very quick question and squeezing out a confession out of each and every one of you. Now, how many of you have ever taken the easy way out of something in your lives? I want to see every hand up. If you don't raise your hand, I know you're lying. We've all done it. See, look at my hand. So, once again, I'm going to say, we've all taken the easy way out of something at some point in our lives. And we call this the path of least resistance. And basically what that means is, it allows us to get ourselves out of situations that might make us uncomfortable or tired. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. As humans, we're perfectly capable of perceiving our own limits. And sometimes I even question whether or not I should be getting up at 5 every day to go on a run. But what's not okay is wasted potential. And that's really started to become a pattern in my generation. I've started to notice that we're becoming more and more detached from each other, and we've also started to embrace the bare minimum more. We've started sacrificing the quality of our work, and modern culture has become all about life hacks and efficiency. But what has that done to our work ethic? Now, of course, like I said earlier, we've started sacrificing the quality of our work in order to just get it over and done with, without even considering whether or not we've actually completed the task at hand to the best of our ability. And if somebody asked me to define culture today, I'd say that it is how we're raised or how we grow up. And this could be in a culture or in a community environment, or it could be in an endless expanse of forums. I find that online culture is one of the greatest driving factors behind my generation's current lack of motivation and our investment in the bare minimum. And of course, for some people, it's possible to find success with these quick and easy fixes if we're lucky. But for others, that is simply not enough. Because, like David Goggins said in his book, although some of us can enjoy the fruits of our labors, others know and others learn that our labors can be our fruits and that the process can be a reward. Well, what sets these two groups of people apart? Well, if I asked this question 20 years ago, the answer that I would find is would be very different. And what does culture have anything to do with what does culture and the way that we're raised have anything to do with this? Again, very, very different 20 years ago. And let's ignore the fact that I wasn't alive back then and move on, all right? So, according to the Harvard Business Review, some backgrounds actually used to produce harder working people than others. And that's because of either one of two reasons. One would be out of pure necessity. And two will be because individual societies used to produce individuals with certain characteristics. And what this would mean is, and obviously this is accredited to the way that we're raised by these cultures and by our parents. So modern parenting can be all across this huge spectrum, and it can range from being in a household or being in a culture that nurtures you and creates a comfortable environment for you, or being in an environment that pushes you to your limits in order for you to find success. Now, of course, both of these approaches do have their pros and cons. One of the greatest driving factors, one of the greatest negative impacts that this kind of culture can have on you, especially a culture with high academic expectations for students, is mental health issues. Now, as you can see in this graph here, according to the National Library of Medicine and the World Psychiatric Association, student suicide rates have been on the rise since the 1960s, especially in students between the ages of 15 and 19, and in non-European males. Now, moving towards the East and Asia, we know for a fact that some parents have a tendency of being more strict with their children. And of course, that's not necessarily a bad thing, mainly because all these parents, or at least most of them, if not all, know for a fact that they're really trying to push their children to their limits for their success. How do they know this though? Well, the answer is actually quite simple, and it's because they were raised that way. It would make sense, right? If you were raised in a certain way and you turned out seemingly just fine, then why shouldn't your children? And the answer to that is also quite simple, and that's because the world around us has been changing so dramatically, and it's been turned upside down. All of these individual cultures that I was talking about earlier, they've kind of integrated into one another, and they've fused together. And all these individual characteristics created and developed by these individual cultures have also fused. And this brings me to my additional point, which is globalization and the universality of media. Am I correct in assuming that everyone here who's chronically online has seen this meme? Yeah, you've all seen it? See, that's exactly what I mean, right? That should give you a good enough idea of how we all see similar things in the media. And that also forms a culture in of itself. So what I mean by that is, oh, by the way, this is called meme culture. I highly suggest you guys check it out. It's actually quite interesting if you check it out. But what this means is that when we think of culture, we don't always consider what we always make connections to. It would be like religion, for example, different religions, different races, different customs, traditions, beliefs, values, or lifestyles. But we don't always consider that culture can also take the form of what we have access to, and also the media that we consume, how that also creates subcultures. So we've also all heard a million times that our generation has been losing our attention spans at a dramatic level. And it's actually quite concerning because we've kind of accepted it as an unchangeable fact. And we probably sick of hearing it by now, but that's what we really think it is. Nobody's disturbed by this. We're losing our focus. And that's distracting us from what we could be doing instead, things that are more productive, things that could be helping us build our own futures. A great example of this can be found online in these inspirational and motivational videos of people. I'm sure you've all seen this on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts. What you see is there's these people in front of mirrors or in front of cameras posing, showing off these athletic poses, showing off these incredible weight loss transformations. And one would assume that this is actually, this would have a positive impact on people watching it. You would think that they'd be inspired and motivated to make positive changes in their own lifestyles. Unfortunately, it's actually the opposite. Now, when we see something on the internet that appeals to us, what really happens is our brains release dopamine. And for those of you who don't know what that is, dopamine is a happy hormone, and it's essentially the body's reward system. And what happens then is your brain starts to make the connection that, oh, since we're feeling this, this reward system going on right now, this must be what we're doing. We must be improving ourselves while watching these videos. Of course, this is dopamine that we could be getting from more natural sources. For example, working out, or spending time with family or friends, or doing well on an assignment. These are all sources of dopamine. But instead, we mindlessly consume this content. And like I said, we make that connection that by watching these videos, we are improving ourselves, which, ladies and gentlemen, could not be further from the truth. And since our brains are on a constant drive, on a constant lookout for more dopamine, we keep scrolling. That's what happens. And these things on social media, they're called dopamine mines, right? We keep looking for them. We keep digging deeper, finding more dopamine to make us feel better, to make us feel more accomplished with ourselves. And even I find myself in this loophole. I find myself scrolling for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, a full hour sometimes, just to go looking for that next hit of dopamine to make me feel like the amount of effort that I'm putting into something is substantial. And I still struggle to resist the constant tugging of online platforms. And I've noticed in my generation that we've started to develop a tendency to settle for mediocrity. And what that means is we're putting in only the bare minimum of effort that we can put in just to tick the boxes. We've started to burrow into our comfort zones and into that path of least resistance that I mentioned earlier. And it's come to the point where we can't even handle the slightest amount of discomfort or hard work in our lives, when we should really be embracing this hard work and embracing the discomfort, because that's what's going to bring us joy at the end of the process and during that process. When I was writing this speech, I was actually struggling with some of the things that I'm talking about right now. I was having a really hard time with academics. I was struggling to balance my social life. My social life was struggling, and with my extracurriculars, and especially the CIS swim team. I was struggling at swim training, and it came to the point when I started to debate whether or not it's time for me to drop out of the swim team. And the more I started thinking of this, the more I fell in love with the idea. I'd have more comfort, more free time, and I started thinking of all these reasons. For example, I'd have more time to work on my academic endeavors. I'd have more time to spend with my family and my friends, more time to practice my instruments. Oh, and by the way, my ankle's injured. I could do without swim training, I really don't need it. It's just hurting me at this point. And 20 other reasons. And that's what I thought they were. I thought they were reasons. I used them as a justification to fuel my direction towards quitting. And that night I went home and I talked to my parents about it. And I told them I want to quit the swim team. And I immediately expected a negative response. I told them I thought I would hear, no, you can't quit the swim team, we're not going to let you. But instead what they did was they looked into my eyes and they told me, do whatever you want. And I could hear the disappointment in their voices. But I didn't think much of it at that moment. But the more I started thinking about it, the more I started to realize that all those reasons that I listed before, they were not justifications, they were excuses. And I could have quit the swim team. I really could have. And maybe then I wouldn't be standing here in front of you today feeling guilty about skipping swim training to attend this event. By the way, true story. I'm probably going to open my phone later to get bombarded by my teammates calling me a slacker. But that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that I could not bring myself to quit. And that's because that's not the way that I was raised. And I decided to stop making excuses and to stop clinging to that path of least resistance and to make a change. I broke free. And the advice that I would give to anyone here who's going through this kind of thing is that you can't expect to win a game unless you stay in the game long enough to learn how to win. Now, this works with this example because I decided to sacrifice swim training, or I was going to sacrifice swim training to focus on other factors of my life. But then I would never have learned how to balance all of these factors equally. And now my academics have improved, and my social life has never been better. And yes, I'm still in the swim team. So what I'm trying to say is that the media that we're consuming, the media that's available to us, contradicts itself. Because all of these influencers seem to preach these values of hard work and discipline. But meanwhile, all of their content is only putting us deeper into this coma of complacency. Then again, we can consider the challenges and the rapid growth of this online culture, and we can consider an opportunity to improve ourselves, to develop and to teach ourselves these skills of discipline, self-control, hard work, and perseverance, and to truly reach out for our ambitions and whatever they may be in the real, tangible world. Thank you.